So we're going to do the sine function now. And we already saw the sine function in the unwrapping of the circle. And if you remember, the sine function looks like an S shape, kind of like the one that's right here. And the basic one is sine of x, and it goes either like down and up and then in the middle again, or it goes up and down and in the middle again. We're going to look at the sine function with the parameters, the transform sine function, and we're going to look at what each of these means. Okay, so first of all, we have the A. Now the A stands for amplitude, and it's often designated by the letter big A, amplitude, and it really represents the distance from the middle to the max. So this right here would be one amplitude, and from the middle to the minimum point that you see here would be the other amplitude. So the amplitude is represented by the letter A, and the absolute value of A is equal to the amplitude. The formula for getting the amplitude is the absolute value of the max minus the min point divided by 2. So the difference between here and here divided by 2. That would be the A. So the B has to do with the length of your one cycle. So a sine function is periodic. It comes and repeats itself over the same period, and that's one cycle. So right here to the end of where it comes back to the same space, this is considered one period. So we'll do that distance right here in green. So from here to here is considered the length of the period. Now for you to figure out the length of the period, you just need to look at the distance between this point and that point, but it's related to the B value. So the B value is actually 2 pi over the length of the period. That's what it represents, because a circle has a complete rotation is 2 pi. And the reverse to get your period, if you want, once you know your B, it would be 2 pi over the absolute value of B. Now the other thing that you need to know is the H and the K. So the H and the K represent any point in the middle. Could have been this one too. It's your choice where you place the H and the K. It's always in the middle of the S. It's not the max and it's not the min in the sine function. In the cosine function, it's also in the middle, but it's not on the function. So in the sine function, it's literally in the middle of the S, and it depends where you want to place it. And I will show you in the next screen what I'm talking about, because we could have started our sine function from here and then gone down, up, and completed it on the other side. So the H and K will really be changing for different perspectives. And it will be your starting point in the middle of a curve. Now, the next thing to look at is the A times the B, which would be these two parameters. If A times B is bigger than 0, so it means if you were to multiply the two, both of them positive or both of them negative, and it was bigger than 0, your shape would be that starting from the H, you'd be going up, going down, and then going up again. This would be considered increasing. And then if your A times B is less than 0, that means if your H and K would be there, you'd be decreasing first before you start increasing. And this is considered decreasing. And that's pretty much everything that you need to know about the sine function. The cycle, one more thing, is for the period, there'll always be a half point where it reaches the middle again. So in this case, the half point would be there. That's the middle of the period, where it comes back to the same center. And at every quarter of that, you'd have the max, and then you'd have the min. So you can divide your period into 4 parts. Okay, now let's look at a problem where we're going to see an equation. We're going to see a graph, and we're going to try to come up with the equation. So before I start the equation, I need to explain to you that any graph can be represented by either a sine function or a cosine function. So let's look at what I'm talking about. Supposing I said, let's figure out this graph. Well, I can start from here, look at one cycle, and finish here. And I see here that my perspective would be an increasing function. I could have equally started down here, gone up, and gone down. Oops, not all the way down, just up until this point right here. So my h and k would be here if I decided to choose this yellow version. If I decide to do the blue version, my h and k would be here. You could even start it here. It doesn't matter. The h and k is really where you choose to start from. The other thing that you need to recognize, and I'll choose a crayon, we could have looked at this as a version of cosine. If you remember how cosine looked like it was a U or like a C. We could have done the upside down, the U, happy face, or we could have done the sad face. Now, all you have to realize is that the period for the sine function and the cosine function and the amplitude is going to be exactly the same. The only thing that will change is your h. So we're going to look at doing the sine function, and then remember, once we do the cosine function, you can do any application problem using a sine or cosine version. So let's look at what we're going to do right now with the sine. We'll just erase this quickly. Okay. I've put a dotted line here because I was trying to show the amplitude, so we're going to do that. Just make this a little bit smaller. Okay, so what do we know about this? First of all, there are certain things we need to look at. We know the maximum point. The maximum point is equal to 3. Let's analyze our graph. We know the minimum point. The minimum point is equal to -3. My job is to figure out where the middle would be. So I'm assuming it's here because it's pretty easy looking at the 3 and the 3. But just to make sure, amplitude is going to be here, from here to here. And it represents max minus the min divided by 2. So if I do that, that's 3 minus the -3 divided by 2. And of course, it's going to be 3 plus 3 is 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the amplitude is 3. Now I didn't mention k in the previous slide, but k, to get k is equal to the max minus the amplitude. And it also could be the min plus the amplitude. Okay, so in that case, we'll say 3 minus 3 is 0, and that's what we get. So the max minus the amplitude, which is 3, is equal to 0, and that's precisely where our k will be. And it's in the middle of it. So I'll take that version and say, well, let's start from there. And let's highlight the section that I'm going to look at. Okay, so we have that section. And now we know the amplitude. We just have to figure out the period. So the period, remember, is from one starting point all the way to the other. And that will be from 1 to 5. So for the period, you know it's going to be 5 minus 1 because it's this point to that point. So it's equal to 4. So we pretty much have everything in place. We know this is an increasing function from the yellow perspective. So all we have to do, if I dual page this, let's see. Oops. Okay, so all I have to do is put the formula together. So these are the parameters we need. Okay, so we know our A. Our A, we said, is 3. We know that the B is going to be defined by 2 pi over the length of the period. And since we know the period, it's 2 pi over 4. And you're going to be able to reduce that. So right here, for the place of b, you put pi over 2, x minus the 1, and there's no k, it's actually 0, so you can just not even write that. And because this is an increasing function, a can be positive, and so is b. Or a could be negative, and b is negative. So you could also write y is equal to negative 3 sine negative pi over 2 x minus 1, and you're done with it. So that's how you do the rules. It's not that complicated. If you wanted to do it from another perspective, so supposing we were going to do, let's try a different color. We'll go with the blue this time, and we're going to use this perspective. So if you notice, I'm starting from the negative 1. So for the blue one, if I would just, this is what I'm doing here, I would be doing, so this one was the yellow one, and now we're going to do the blue one. Okay, so I would have the same everything, same a, same values, except the only thing that changes is where I started from. So for the blue one, it would be y is equal to 3 sine, same period, pi over 2. I don't have to put the negative yet. I will talk about it right after. And then it will be x minus minus 1, so that makes plus 1, and your k is still 0. Now, because this is decreasing, what's different is that I'm going to have either the a or the b negative. I choose to put the a, or you can choose to put the b. Oh, no, not the a again. You only just did that. Okay, so sine of pi over 2 negative x plus 1. So you have two versions. So technically you could write many different versions of the rule, and they're all valid. Hopefully that helps, and now you can practice coming up with a rule when you're given the graph. When we're doing problems, we're going to have to interpret where the h and the k is. And we'll see that next.